There was a Netflix. It came out on Netflix here, but I think it actually was released in the UK first,
Mhm.
and it was called His House, and it's a bit of a horror movie, haunted house movie, if you will, about a sub-Saharan African family, or just husband and wife, who come to the UK, kind of what you're describing, and then they don't get put in a hotel.
Yeah.
They get put in, and I don't know, are the hotels a post-COVID thing,
Uh,
or they
I'm
been
not.
going on this before?
I think there are post-COVID thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this movie is a pre-COVID movie, but they put them in a neighborhood that you're describing, a deindustrialized kind of rundown neighborhood in a kind of rundown flat, and then the flat is haunted and blah 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 blah. Not going to get into it, but basically, what you find out is that the ghosts that are haunting this family,
Mhm.
you think it's the ghost of a dead child of theirs, and you find out they basically kidnapped a child
Mhm.
to flee.
Yeah.
And have you seen the movie?
No.
They kidnapped the child to flee, and the kid ends up dying in a boat. And they pretty much killed a kid to get out of a war torn country. Do you think movies like that work as racist propaganda, or do they work as something to humanize the refugees? Because listening to some of the news reports that I could get from
Mhm.
what was going on and listening to what people were saying there, I was like, oh wow, a movie like that would probably rile people up more than maybe be humanizing for these refugees.
Yeah. That from what you're describing, it can serve that purpose. I'll give you a different movie that
Sure.
touches on. It's from last year by Ken Loach, the
Hmm.
British socialist director. It's like it probably is probably going to be his last film, and it's called The Old Oak, and it's about Syrian refugees who come into another deindustrialized former mining community in the north, Yorkshire, and um, it talks about how this family come in, and they do face this resentment and this racist reaction from others, because this this community, because the point is like this community was battered by, say, Margaret Thatcher, because um, if you know that Mrs. Thatcher, you know, broke the mining unions
Hmm.
like in the 80s, and it's kind of very good because it uses like the differing struggles these communities have had. One working class, socialist, mining community, because one of the people that helps this Syrian family is a former mining organizer, um, who feels you could you get the sense that he's a very defeated man, and then how he kind of has empathy with the struggles of this Syrian family who fled who were part of the protest against the Assad regime because they wanted freedom and their democracy, but then because of the civil war and the violence, they had to flee. So I think that was a good job of humanizing both sides, if you will,
Hmm.
of this divide that you often see between the refugee and the, so to speak, native.
And that's where I found the news reports and how this story came to be so shocking. Um, how has the rapid spread of misinformation on social media platforms contributed to the escalation of racial tensions in the UK? What role did influencers like Tommy Robinson and Andrew Tate play in spreading these false narratives about the Southport incident? And and this is a long multi-part question, and I'll,
Yeah,
I'll say it again if you forget. How
yeah,
do you see the relationship between social media and mainstream media evolving, especially as mainstream outlets increasingly rely on
yeah.
social media as a source?
It's funny because in the aftermath of the Southport stabbings, you because the police couldn't say who the suspect was because he was underage,
Hmm.
and it only took a judge like edict to reveal who he is because of the rumors and misinformation that was surrounding it. So like they had to say no, we're gonna have to just shut this down now. Uh, so then you had this void of information, and then you had like people like Andrew Tate, who literally used the phrase like, "Oh, he's fresh off a boat, asylum seeker," and it's weird with Andrew Tate because apparently he's a convert to Islam, yet he was pouring fuel into this anti-Muslim like racism that fueled the riots itself. Um, so that's strange, and it's not just Tommy Robinson, but also Nigel Farage,
Oh, another
who
one.
yeah, who was saying on GB News that this guy might be a Muslim. And incidentally, Nigel Farage revealed that he got that from Andrew Tate.
so so basically there's just a circle of lies. So
Yeah,
one person goes like this: I bet it was a Muslim. It was a Muslim? I heard it was a Muslim. So
yeah,
that's, hey, sources say it was a Muslim. And that's what happened.
yeah.
That was the
And
game of telephone. Interesting.
and it's I would say that this the narratives that fueled this riots have been like under the surface for years because these riots just didn't come out of nowhere. Like it's wrong to just say that they just sort of puffed into existence.
Mhm.
Um, like Tommy Robinson, like before the Southport riots, like held a demonstration, and you know, where there was around about I think 20,000 people there, which is far larger than he was able to muster when he was the leader of the EDL.
You said
Like
this happened before the riots?
yes, like a few days before the stabbings in Southport.
So this has been kind of he can get a resurgence, if you will. And not even
Yeah,
a resurgence. Now you're saying he's back and bigger and badder than ever.
yeah, like his
Interesting.
because you have to understand the context is like last year there were similar riots in Ireland
Mhm.
over a stabbing by an Algerian immigrant who had lived in Ireland for a long time. But he stabbed a kid, and then there were similar riots in Ireland, fueled by the same, very similar anti-immigrant like resentment and narratives and racial, you know, fears about demographic change, mass immigration, and how the elites two-tier policing. That's a buzz phrase that's been used
Mhm.
recently. So that Tommy Robinson tried to get on the coattails of that last year, and he's been able to, and others, not just him. There's a whole kind of ecosystem that's been like pummeling this narrative online, where they can say they're like insurgents against the liberal establishment and their agenda for mass immigration and their soft spot for Islam and stuff. Um, and their narrative, you know, will point to things, so like if you listen to Tommy Robinson, people of his kidney, they'll mention stuff like the grooming gangs in Rotherham. So if in case anybody's unaware of what I'm talking about, so like 10 years ago, there was uncovered a massive scandal in places like Rotherham, which was a site of the riots as well, where like um, the sort of organized like child sex abuse gangs basically were prostituting like really young girls. Now,
Jesus.
what made this sort of racially toxic was um, the people doing the raping were predominantly of Pakistani descent,
Hmm.
and the victims were predominantly white English girls. So already from the optics of it, it's it's something very
Not a good look.
vulnerable. Yeah, it's not a good look. And what even compounds it even more is the authorities did virtually nothing for years. And you see the similar pattern, not just in Rotherham, but in other towns. And it's the same kind of towns I'm describing, like deindustrialized,
Hmm.
deprived, former mining, other industrial jobs towns. And people like Tommy Robinson or and others will have this very racialized narrative around it. So they'll say it's because of, mass immigration. It's because of Islam. That's what is fueling this. That's you know, and the elite don't care about us, our people. They care about those other people, you know.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, this stuff has really does have a very toxic element to it because, you know, 8 years ago, before the Brexit referendum, an MP called Joe Cox was assassinated by a far right fascist type who, you know, killed her because she was apparently a traitor.
Jesus.
Because, yeah, yeah. And we've had, people, it's weird because, after Donald Trump was nearly killed,
Hmm.
some people in Britain decide to polish our halos and say, "Oh, look at those Americans with their political violence and you know their history of politicians being targeted." It's like, bruv, recent in this past decade, we've had two MPs being assassinated,
That's
and
insane, dude.
yeah, two MPs. That's really insane, and multiple others being credibly like threatened, mainly by the far right, and it it's it's just really it is there's a really toxic element to it because this stuff has been like subterranean, it's been under the surface, but Southport just was the moment of opportunity where it could rise to the surface.